This is Tell Your Story, Alaska. We talk aviation, history, theology, but most of all, the raw stories of Alaskans and the gospel. All right, welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story, Alaska. Today, I am with Pastor Mathew Vroman from Akutan, Alaska, and I just recorded an episode about Akutan, Alaska. And most notable there is the Trident Seafoods Company. But Matt is the pastor of Safe Harbor Church with his wife Diane in Akutan, Alaska. And so I've got him on the show today to talk about Akutan. So Matt, thank you for coming on.
Oh, it's good to be here. Good to be here.
Great. And so Matt, let's start with you. You're the pastor of Safe Harbor Church in Akutan. And so tell me, how long have you been the pastor there?
We've been there 2 years next month. November 2024 will be 2 years. So really soon we're hitting the 2-year mark.
Yeah, okay, great. And I know there was kind of I found this in my research about Akutan, is that there's a couple of pastors behind you as well. So you're kind of the third in line or so, is that right?
Oh, they've had several. I didn't know any of them, but they've had several over the years. The church is, I think, a little over 25 years old. So they've had, they've had several and stuff. So
yeah, okay.
They come and go because the remote aspect really makes for, sometimes it's challenging, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in all the villages of Alaska, the isolation, the remoteness is why missionaries who stay are few and far between. Okay, so
that is
where
very
are you from?
True. That is very, very true. So, yes.
Yeah, so where are you from originally, Matt?
Originally, I was born in San Diego, California, but we moved to Missouri when I was 2 or 3, and then grew up in a small town in the great state of Missouri, Glasgow, Missouri. Went to University of Missouri, found Christ. God called us out. Got married. God called us out. We were in the military for about 4 years. San Antonio. We worked in Turkey, serving the Lord, the country of Turkey. Then went to the east side of Detroit. Was pastor of a primarily African American church. Came back to Missouri for 3 or 4 years during the great time of COVID, and then God called us to reach the nations and natives here in Alaska.
So how did you get connected to Akutan, Alaska then, from Missouri?
Okay, so of course you have to give the spiritual answer, God. But yeah, I mean, it's God. We were in a small town in Missouri, 16,000, Sykeston, close to my family. And I went to visit a friend in Florida. There, God reawakened my heart for the nations. So God kind of started stirring stuff. And this is the God part. Most Americans, I have learned, see, when I was little, I'm 54, everything was Hawaii. Hawaii was a cool thing. I mean, if you're my age, you saw the Brady Bunch, they went to Hawaii. But now I've learned it's all about Alaska. People love Alaska. It is something American. I wasn't one of them. I think I watched like a minute of Deadliest Catch. So I'm not one of those that, I really want to go to, if we can only go on a cruise to Alaska. No, that wasn't me. So out of the blue, with God stirring my heart, I called a mission agency in Anchorage, and they said, you need to call this one guy because there's this little church out in the Aleutians. And I said, So I called the man, Jim Hamilton, and then he put me in contact with this church, and one thing led to another. We interviewed with the church board, and then the smart thing they did was they said, okay, before we want to know if God's called you, we're going to take you out here for 2 days because you got to see the reality. So we jumped on you don't jump on a plane, but got on a plane from Anchorage, flew to Dutch Harbor in Alaska, took the plane and then the helicopter, and we landed in our backyard of the church, which is a helicopter pad. We were here about 2 days, and then coming back, we came out of the St. Louis airport, and I really did have one of those Whom shall I was just like, the Lord just powerfully spoke to me, that passage from Isaiah, whom shall I send and whom shall go forth? And I just knew, I looked around, I was like, oh, we're called. So then a few weeks later, I can't remember, 3 or 4 weeks later, we were in Akutan in November.
Wow. And have you experienced that sort of shock of the isolationness of the place? Like, was it daunting, or have you worked through that? Or how's that been for you?
I don't know if mine is normal. So I know interacting with some of the other people living around the wonderful state of Alaska, the isolation can come because it's dark all the time, you're snowed in. Well, the Aleutians, they call it the lower chain, we don't really drop that often below zero. We do drop below zero, but like we don't have, days and months. We get snow. I mean, we had snow in April. There's a little snow on the mountaintops. So it's not that kind of isolation, but I think just the reality of there's only 2 stores. It's small. It's kind of like when you're remote, it's different than what most people in America live, because you're not always, like in America, everybody says, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. Well, you're not so busy on Akutan because there's not a whole lot to do. So you have to feel, so yes, you kind of feel that, I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it. Kind of you're just kind of remote, and you are, even though there's people here, you are alone, but it's just a different feeling. So
you kind of have to change you have to kind of change your mindset about how you use time, because I'm assuming when you lived in Missouri and other places, you were busy, but now you got to reframe your mindset around, a slower pace of life, like where you are. Is that the case?
Yes. And it's different because everywhere. So you take, like, people who are listening to this, kind of give you a concept. So some of you are like probably thinking like, well, I like alone time and I don't like to, I'm not that busy, but you still may be on a weekend, you run out somewhere, or you go out to Home Depot to pick up something, or you run to the store. We don't have that. You don't run out anywhere. I mean, there's one little street that's maybe a quarter of a mile long, and there's about 3 or 4 vans on the island, or cars, and we own one of them in the church. And so it's not where you're just going. So you really do have to restructure your mind, and still learning that, obviously, with 2 years. But as Americans,
do you ever experience what some people call cabin fever, where you're just in the same place all the time and there's not really anywhere to go?
I don't know if I call it cabin fever. I'm not really sure. I don't know. It's just learning to, I think, like everybody, we all struggle with the reality of contentment. And I would say that's what it really boils down to. It's not just finding the will of God, but can everybody be content in the will of God? And I would say when God wrote the verses on waiting on Him, potentially one group of people, He said, this group feels going to have struggle as Christians in America. We don't like to wait on anything. Nothing in our culture is waiting or patience. It's all about doing and going.
Yeah, we've definitely adopted that in our culture, as we equate busyness with purposefulness, and it's just not the case.
Yeah, and it's not altogether bad, but it's just it's all perspective, because you can be super busy and be content, but it's really a hard attitude. But I do think that's always the struggle. It's like all things, it brings out who you really are when you're not able to move and avoid it.
Now, Matt, you also have some children. How many children do you have? And tell me about how they have adapted to life there.
We have 24. She's living in Missouri now with my dad, and then we have one who is 22, one who is 18, and they are going to Bible college at West Coast Baptist College in Lancaster, California, with Pastor Chapel there. Great school. And then our 15-year-old, who we are homeschooling this year, and that has been, an adjustment because we haven't done much homeschooling. So I think,
and obviously a big change for your 15-year-old to move out there. Yeah, that's a hard adjustment.
It is a hard adjustment.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about the history of Akutan. I told you before we hit record, I wanted to hear your knowledge about this place. I did record an episode about Akutan just based on researching online and stuff. But from your perspective, I know go ahead.
I was going to ask you, did you mention World War II history, that kind of stuff? Because that's significant in his story.
Only briefly that in World War II, the town was abandoned, and then they returned a few years later, but only briefly.
This is the last whaling station, not World War II, in the United States of America, was in Akutan. Across the Barren Sea, there is the old whaling station. But the most significant thing that's very interesting from a military standpoint is during World War II, we were getting, from what I understand, pretty well shelled by the Japanese Air Force. And during World War II, there was a Japanese pilot who was, because there's a lot of military action going on in the Aleutians, in these islands. You can find bunkers in Dutch Harbor in Alaska. And there was a Japanese pilot flying over Akutan and decided to land. Now, as we know World War II history, we know many times God did miraculous things. The battle had been just different times. Well, this is an amazing story. So we can't figure out the Japanese airships. So this pilot looks down and he sees this green strip of land. And he decides to land there. Now, if he had landed 100 feet over, he would have been solid land, but it was swampy. And so he ended up basically crashing, but the ship was not destroyed. Our Navy recovered it. You can actually see a picture, July 11th, 1942, recovers it, and that allows America to study the plane, and that allowed us to help beat the Imperial Japanese Navy fighter pilot. And so,
I did hear about this, Matt. That's so interesting. I wish I would have thought of it. Because you're talking about the Japanese Zero, and the American planes were not able to outmaneuver them. Yeah,
so they call it the Akutan Zero,
the Akutan Zero,
the
that's right.
Zero. Yeah,
so by studying the Akutan Zero, they were able to out design it basically, and that's what in a large way turned the war around, right?
In the air, aerial and stuff. So, they actually will get every once in a while, every year they get Japanese tourists. In fact, one day our church is pretty well always open. This Japanese guy came in and he was looking around. It was kind of wild. I didn't have any Japanese literature. I've got to get some. But so Akutan. So we have an active volcano. Now remember, for those that are listening, like, oh my gosh, it doesn't mean it's exploding volcano. And you covered that, I know. And you have hot springs. Now, what's amazing about the Aleutians, the amount of geothermal energy is incredible. But the problem is they don't have the money to harvest it. I'll just give you an example. I don't know how much is here, but Dutch Harbor is 40 miles away. Similar they have active volcanoes. Literally, a guy said they could heat 27 Los Angeles for over 100 years with the amount of geothermal that's in the ground. And so that's another thing they really want to harvest. They have wild cows. A lady came out from Iowa and she brought cows and sheep and goats and tried to, her name was Brown, and tried to raise them. Didn't go so well, but there are some wild cows on the island. So
Wow.
it's a native village, about 100 people. You covered all that. It is a bear to get to. A lot of cool birds. We don't have bears. There's a trivia question. Does every place in Alaska have bears? No, we do not have bears in Akutan. We have foxes. We have otters. Look right out my window. There's an otter swimming. We have ducks, Harlequin ducks. We have sea lions. Every once in a while, you'll see whales. I haven't got to see them yet. Like I said, we have the wild cows, and they can actually be fairly dangerous. And then lots of fishes. What's also interesting is when you go over the dock, you can look down and see starfishes and all kinds of cool sea anemones and all kinds of neat stuff like that. So it's so we don't have a lot of pests, no mosquitoes.
No mosquitoes,
so that's,
no kidding.
A little bit. And then we have the largest, let me see if I say it right, the largest fully integrated fishing processing plant is located on the island of Akutan. It's a Trident Seafoods plant. And for those of you who don't know, Trident Seafood is probably the largest, I don't know for sure, but seafood company in the world. They supply from this little plant. They do pollock, cod, halibut, the most, like over 400 million pounds of fish. The pollock, because it goes to like the surimi, which is pure protein, but it also makes like the fish sandwiches for McDonald's, Burger King, Long John Silver's. They do fish for Costco, and then they send it over to Europe a lot and stuff. So they have
there's a good chance that if you've purchased fish at McDonald's, there's a really good chance it has gone through that plant in Akutan.
Yes, I think so. So if you have, so then they have to stock that plant with people working. So they get immigrants from all over the world that come to America. Of course, natural born citizens too, but tons of people who come to America, the American dream, and are so excited about having a job that they can work there and make the American dream. It's so inspiring. They come from Ukraine, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Mexico, Guinea, Congo, just Liberia, so many different countries in the world. Over the years, Mongolia, they had Mongolians before. All over the years, they've been there at that fishing plant. To explain a little bit about
really
fishing.
Interesting. That's so interesting to hire so many foreigners. Why bring in so many
legal?
Right. Sure, yeah, they're legal, but why so many foreigners from such diverse places?
And what's interesting is they work 7 days a week, 12-hour days.
Wow.
They work really hard. There's 2 seasons. You have A season, B season. You have Alaska fishing land and American fishing. And foreigners cannot fish in our lands. That's a law that was passed. I think it's called the Ted Stevens Act. And that was one of the reasons we're so blessed with the fishing population. They did do crab. It's been down, and that's been a concern. So, so that's right. So our church sits right in the middle of the native village and the fishing plant. So our fishing plant sits in the middle of the native village and the fishing plant. Our church sits in the middle of the native village and the fishing plant. And that's what we do. We reach out. We have a gym. We have a sanctuary. We have any way we can be intentional with connecting with people. So our ministry is very unique because we do have the native village, but we also have the fishing plant there. So, for example, last night, it was all ladies except for one from the village, 3 or 4, and they're all beating. The night before, I probably had 25 guys from Ukraine, Mexico, Africa in our end of season soccer tournament. Church, we have 3 or 4, and then we 1 o'clock we meet because we have to do round shift work, and 7:30 at night, and we can have anywhere from 5 to 15 to 12 to 3, but generally there'll be people from all over connecting with our church service. At 2:30 today, I'm meeting with a guy from the Philippines that works up there. to do Bible study. The point is, we have a very unique opportunity God has given us in this church to reach the nations that are coming here to work.
Yeah, that's really fascinating that the nations come to you through this seafood company. So what does a typical week look like? How many events do you have, and what do services look like, and how is it look with so much transience, people in and out so much?
A lot of people come back. And again, we've only been here 2 years, so this will be our 4th season. So A season runs January to April-ish. B season runs May, June to, it'll be over in a few weeks. But a lot of it's the same people. And sometimes a few people will stay in between the seasons. But we try to, church right now we're doing 2 services, 1 o'clock, 7:30. We'll see how it changes after people start going home. And that's the key thing. The difference is when people are working 12-hour days, 7 days a week, you can't go long. People physically cannot sit through a long service. So like Bible study, 20 or 30 minutes on Wednesday. Services, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And then Monday nights we have soccer. Tuesday nights we have basketball. Wednesday nights we have Bible study. Thursday nights, sometimes soccer. Also Tuesday night we have beading. Friday night we always have a movie night where we have popcorn and soda. And then Saturday night we have basketball. And then it cranks up again. And I'll go over and eat lunch generally on the plant and just chat with people. And then in the evening we go over there and eat. So we don't really cook a lot because we're eating at the plant, connecting with people. And that's the goal, is to connect with people authentically. It's all for the gospel. So why do we do soccer? Well, because we want to bless the people. We want to connect with them so we can share the gospel with them. But you don't reach people if you don't have a relationship with them. It just doesn't work that way. And so we have a phenomenal gym. We have weights. Just incredible. So
it sounds like the church acts as a recreational center. So a lot of your events are not necessarily like church events. So people come to play the sports and different things. But of course, this gives you, access to people relationally. And you share the gospel with them. For the ones that are there for just the sports and stuff, that's where it starts, is with the relationship there.
Yeah, a lot of one-on-one conversations. Then we'll do a special events, like we'll have, what'll be the next thing? Probably it will be Thanksgiving. We'll do a big meal for Thanksgiving. I don't think we have anything before that. And then we'll have all kinds of stuff during Christmas. Christmas Eve is a highlight. There's, plan is down to about 100 people, 150 from over 1,000. But we'll do like a multi-language service and try to include different languages. It's a very special, special time.
How do you do that?
Mother's Day.
How do you do that with so many different languages? Do you have translators?
So we don't do translation, but for example, last year I had the same verse and around the songs and themes, and I had the overheads with some of the major languages. But I think I had 5 or 6 or 7 different people read the same verse in their language. So we had Ukrainian. We had all kinds, Tagalog from Philippines, Spanish, English, French from the African countries. I want to say we had another language. I can't remember, but there were so many. And then we had few people sing in different languages. And it's just trying to connect. But probably the highlight of that evening, other than just such a diverse, we have Muslims there. We've had different people come out. But I was dropping them back off and I came back. Here's the Ukrainians. Now think about the Ukrainians for a minute. They're here on a special visa from COVID, not from the war. It was before COVID. They can't get a green card, but they're able to work here legally. And imagine every day you're checking the news, your parents, your grandparents, they don't want to leave. You're constantly seeing your country destroyed. And so I came back and they were like, wait, there's a group of them. And they all sang this Christmas song to me. It was just so neat. But I think Carol the Bells is actually a Ukrainian. It came from Ukraine originally and stuff. But
Wow.
we also figure out how to help. Like we've done like how to become a legal citizen. Had somebody give a lecture on that. Help one lady with her studying for citizenship. And because when you really think about it, we all have political perspectives on immigration. I mean, everybody does. And I have it, you have it, people are right, left. But we always have to remember, even though we should be passionate as American, I'm a veteran, passionate. We need to always remember before even that, we got to be passionate about the Lord. And regardless of how people came, again, we need to have laws, all that. But I'm saying if God brings people here, we need to reach them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I want to do everything I can to love on people, serve them, but also share the gospel with them. And I think that's the heart, because I know some people listening may have, everybody listening will have perspectives when they hear about, oh, you have somebody with a citizenship test. But at the same time, why do I do it? Because I connect with them, serve them. They don't understand, like, why are you doing this? You're not charging me money. Yeah, because I want to share the gospel with them, give out a tract. We have a literature table. So, and again, we have natural born citizens like me, who's born in San Diego, but a lot of people who are immigrating to our country. And it's amazing because it reminds you why America is great. You're serving them, but then you hear their story and you say, hey, there's people in a country that hate America. What do you think? And they just talk about how much this country means to them and the opportunities it's given them. I'll be like, kind of like the American dream. So it is neat to be around the people, just not from the ministry standpoint, obviously, but also just as an American, you remind yourself of why is America the land of opportunity? Because these people are rewriting their whole family tree, their family story through working in America and making it. And it's just an amazing time to remind myself of why America is great too.
Yes. I appreciate what you said about everyone has an opinion about the immigration, and no matter where I used to live in Mexico, and a lot of my Mexican friends came to the United States illegally. They earned money, and then they went back down to Mexico, and with that money, they're able to basically start a life they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And so, yes, I have opinions about that, but when you talk to people face to face and you're meeting them and you're seeing their heart's desire and you're seeing opportunities for, we're talking about immigration and nations and stuff, but as believers, we are a nation that we call the church, the kingdom of God. And so that's the one we want them to immigrate to because it's the greatest nation there is. And so it's a neat connection between the idea of immigration and the kingdom of God, and I think it's a neat correlation there. So that's such an interesting thing. You would not think Alaska to be a place where the nations come, but it absolutely is. It's one of the most diverse states in the United States.
I think it's definitely and it's such a unique. We were, like I said, we lived in Turkey, and I've traveled around. I don't think there's any place I've ever been just like Alaska. And we say everywhere you could say that, but it is a unique place when you have how many places you can't get to by car. It's amazing, and you have so many pockets of little villages, and there aren't going to become mega cities, and they all need the gospel, but they're very. It's remote, and it's definitely, you almost feel like you are on the ends of the earth. So it's crazy. It's wild. So
tell me about the airport there. I noticed is not on the same island. So if you were to fly, how does that work?
So Akutan owns a couple. I think they own a couple islands, but one of them is called Akutan, and it's 4-minute helicopter ride. That's because they don't have any way to make an island on here. It's just not flat enough. They couldn't make I'm sorry. There's no way they could make it. I said there's no way they could make an island. No way they could make an airport here because it's not flat. Well, Akutan has some flat areas, so that's where they built their airport. It's about a 4-minute little over a 4-minute helicopter ride. So people fly from Unalaska there. It's a pretty nice airport in the sense of they can handle a jet and different things. I mean, there's not like a terminal. There's a couple sheds for, to go wait until your helicopter's ready to ride. The other way is you'll take the boat to Unalaska. But yeah, that's where the airport is. So, yeah. But
Wow. So when you want to come and go, you're going to take a helicopter or a boat to Akutan, and you got to wait there because there's no boat terminal.
The boat goes to Dutch Harbor, and
okay.
we just go for about 4.5 hours. Very rough water. This is some of the most difficult, dangerous waters in the world because you've got the Bering Sea, the ocean. They all collide. It's the best. It's some of the greatest fishing in the world. That's why the fishing plant's here. But make no mistake, it is a very, very dangerous waters. It's just very dangerous.
And now, is that because the Bering Sea and the Pacific Ocean, the currents that each of them have are rushing through between the islands?
Yeah, and they collide up here. And from what I understand, there's a pass right when you get out of Akutan Bay, the bay here, that is very not for the faint of heart. But
I had a commercial fisherman. I had a commercial fisherman on my show a while back, and he was telling me about those currents, how the best fishing, but also the roughest waters. So I wonder if there is a graveyard of boats down there. I wonder.
Yeah, I think that's another reality is you have you probably have heard this, but I don't think inland has had this experience. Inland has a lot of suicide and stuff, but here you've had so many people who have lost loved ones at sea through boats capsizing and different things. So I think it is a powerful thing, and it's an interesting spiritual metaphor. I was asking a captain one time because I'm thinking of writing a book on kind of like things I've learned spiritually from commercial fishermen, kind of for them. But tell me if this is not what I'm going to share. He shared with me about boats. If this doesn't apply to the Christian life, he said everything on the sea, wants to kill you, but you have to go out in the sea. And I thought that's like spiritual warfare in the world. Everything wants to take you out, but you got to be there by faith. And then I was talking to them about one of the things they have a challenge when they get somebody new on the boat. They have to understand that everything on that boat can potentially kill them or hurt them. Everything on there is potentially dangerous. And so it's safety is much better, but it's just the reality of danger everywhere at the high seas.
That's a great illustration. And I also think somehow that ideas like that, danger and risk, is what really make people come alive. People think about the adventure of commercial fishing. It's adventurous because there's risk. And especially for men, I think we crave adventure and risk and danger. It in a way, the risk of death makes us come alive. It's just a interesting way we're wired,
The other thing, so let's talk about, there is a difference a little bit. Now, basically, why is everybody here on the plant side? They're here to make money. They're not here coming out. Even the Christians are not here saying, okay, I'm coming in here to go to church. And so you do run into Christians. We have some wonderful Christians. But when you're dealing with somebody who's not a Christian, they're not like your church type of person. It's a man's man. It's a tough world. People are not interested in the gospel generally. That being said, I do have a few people, and you plant seeds and you talk with people, but it's, make no mistake about it. It is a man's man. They kind of say tough world. And that's why people are here, to make money. That's the whole objective of why they come here, because they can make a lot of money.
Sure. Yeah, and so that makes your church extremely unique over most churches, because a church is generally a gathering of believers. but yours has those gatherings. But most of the people who come through are there, they're at the plant to make money, but then they're there for recreation. So it's kind of like a very outreaching type of ministry.
Yes, but another thing, the believers, the Christians that come to church, especially the ones working at the plant. I mean, if they work 12-hour days, 7 days a week, 12-hour days, 7 days a week, and they come, like at one, we're going to have Bible study. We'll probably have a couple of people, 7:30 tonight. We're recording this on a Wednesday. They want to be there because you're not working that, doing that, and then show up at church. It's because you want to be there. But that being said, most people we're dealing with, they just don't really come, but they all have, they all have a spiritual side, and we know God orchestrates where people are. There's that verse in Acts that talks about that God puts people so that they might seek Him and find Him. Well, that's the spiritual immigration verse, and God put people here so we can love on them and share the gospel with them. I mean, I don't know another place where I can do something and then I have Muslims literally coming up thanking me and getting to know me. Well, our soccer league and basket. I mean, it's just such an amazing opportunity. And many of them have told me, I've never met a real Christian. I've never read the Bible. You're like, but they've been in America. Well, I mean, yeah, but they didn't realize that was a Bible. They're not coming in the church. And so, regardless of how you think about Muslims, we know they need to be reached with the gospel. And not all Muslims are terrorists. I could go on and on about that.
I bet you could, yes.
They need to be reached with the gospel. And
that's interesting. I used to work with, back when I was a young bachelor, I had a job in downtown Chicago, and most of my co-workers, I worked for a valet company, and most of my co-workers were young Muslim guys. And we had right around that time was shortly after 9/11. And so we had really interesting conversations, and they were also hilarious. They would, if a helicopter or something flew over, they would go, "Oh, they're after me," and they'd run off, but they were joking. And so we'd all have a good laugh. And so, just they're people,
They're people put their pants on the same way and worrying about money, worrying about making money and stuff. And it's not about comparing the Christian worldview or what to them, but you have to really first see them as people before you see them as Muslim. I heard that, and that's true, because the biggest problem, and so this is a story I never got. So we're in Turkey. We're going to jump to Turkey. That's in Europe, but in Asia. We had a former jihadist who had become a Christian. I mean, he went to America. He went to Iraq to kill Americans. He didn't end up killing them, but he met Christ on the way. And when you get saved, you don't go killing Americans or anybody. So he went back to his family, got kicked out. He went through all these Middle Eastern countries with his little brother. He was 22. His brother was 16. Nobody would baptize him. When he came to our church, we ended up baptizing him. And that was just a testimony again. What will change anybody is the gospel in Jesus Christ. And it's just absolutely true. It's, but it doesn't mean that people always do receive Christ, but you got to expose them to the Word. So we're always looking for creative ways, but a lot of it is just sharing with them, talking with them, conversations. I mean, there's so many hats you wear. So you talk to a Muslim, then I can go over to the table and talk to a Filipino or a Dominican. Or the other night we had a Puerto Rican, and he was here for the soccer tournament. He ended up sticking around, and I ended up getting to share the gospel with him. And I just talked to him. I said, there's two kinds of Jesus. There's religious Jesus, because they're Roman Catholic, and I said, that's fine. That's who you are as a person. That you're born a Roman Catholic. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the life-giving Jesus. And I said the difference is, one, I said, so somebody gets religious, they're going to change their vocabulary when they're in a place of worship and change how they dress, and that's okay, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the one who changes the person in the suit. And shared with him. He really listened, gave him a book, and that was kind of cool. We'll talk again, but it was, that's an example of total different context than dealing with somebody that doesn't have any religious background. And just talking to him about there is a creator and he made us. And I wrote a little book about that, so we have the thing, a lot of us, and we struggle and sometimes we're scared, but I think sometimes we forget that, we don't have to be intimidated because somebody says, I believe in science or I'm this or that, because it's all, at the end of the day, we're stepping out in faith. And people they need to know the Lord, and we need to share with them and need to plant seeds. And it's neat to think sometimes when I step back and think like, I wonder who God's praying for, that guy that I'm getting to share with them and stuff. So, yeah. So there's a lot of different opportunities here, and then you deal with the native, and they have a different way of viewing life, and it's very, very different. Now, our church has been here over 25 years, so it's been actively working, being a part of the community, and that does make a difference. People will come out, everybody, a couple people will come to our services, but most people in the village will come out when we do an event, like a meal or something else. People will come always. It's true. And everywhere, people will come for food. So, yeah.
Well, something I appreciate about you, Matthew, is your sobering perspective, having so many diverse people come through in the conversations, the connection between the gospel and people's personal lives and their worldviews. It's sobering to talk to people with so many different perspectives, and you've had that sobering, and I appreciate that you are, like, the illustrations you're thinking of, like the life of a fisherman risking his life is just like spiritual battle. So it's just neat that you are always thinking of illustrations that connects with people and their individual culture and whatnot.
Yeah,
Matt,
you got it.
do you have one? If you could tell one story, in your 2 years there, what is a story that you could tell about all the different people that have come through?
I've got one. I won't give his name. So I would say, like they always talk like swearing like a sailor. I don't know if you ever grew up hearing that. Well,
oh yeah.
Sometimes we have sayings in English that aren't true. Like they don't, like you meet the person like, oh, why do we have that saying? Well, that would not be one of them. That would be one that's absolutely correct. So I met this guy, and because when you talk about sailors and people fishing, their native tongue is not English or Spanish. It's pretty well swear. It's a tough world. And so I met this guy. I got to know this fishing crew, and they had an old Greek, like a tough guy captain, been there for 40 years. Really, you could tell he's that way. And I met this guy, and he had, a lot of times people who become fishermen are not, they maybe like high school dropouts. They're coming from drugs. There's just kind of a lower class, you could say. They're awesome, but that's kind of the general. He's not like that. He's fairly educated, done a lot of stuff, but he just got tired of, I'm kind of giving general details of that stuff. So he became a fisherman. So I met this guy, and we were talking and just got to know him. He's an atheist at the time, and he's a consistent atheist, because if you don't have God, you don't have a reason to be moral. Philosophically, really, people don't realize this. The idea, if there is no God, there's no morality. Because there's nobody to be accountable to. So he's a consistent atheist. Pretty well any girl he went out with, he slept with, partied hard, early 30s. So I got to know this guy for whatever reason. It was God. He liked me. So he'd stop by and we'd talk and stuff. And I looked at him one day and said, so what's keeping you from believing in God? Give me one reason. And it was the virgin birth. Well, I was able to talk to him about something. I don't even remember what I said, but he said it made him think. So here's how God is. We all know this, but it's so cool when you get to see God working. So backstory, he was involved in Athletes in Action in high school because he played college ball, and he would go to the meetings even though he didn't really care. It was just, kind of what you did as the quarterback or whatever. And then he had a guy like Athletes in Action or Christian Fellowship of Athletes or whatever who was praying for him. and been praying for him because I could tell because he told me it was a guy that's kind of kept up with him, passed a couple years ago. And well, then all of a sudden, this guy who really is secure, he doesn't have any doubt, he has no doubt, very secure. The woman he was having an affair with ended up dying suddenly. And that was the first time I think it hit him about his morality, and it really shook him up. And then when he was getting off weed, he decided to get off weed. He had a dream or a vision that really shook him up. So then, to make a long story short, he started kind of talking with this girl. I think they're dating. She's in the church or something. But he's thinking about Christianity, thinking about all these things, and so you can see God working in this fisherman to where now he's open to the idea of there is a God. He's open to the idea about Christ, and it's just so that's kind of one of my wild stories. There's more, but that's yes for one. So that's a neat story because to see him go from really hardcore atheist to now he's considering it is really amazing.
Well, I have a high appreciation for atheists because you can have more candid conversations with them. Because I feel like most people are what I call them the respectful people. I respect your religion. You believe what you believe. I'm going to believe what I believe. I feel like I can't even have a conversation with someone so kind of wishy-washy about their opinions, their religious opinions. But an atheist, you can go straight to the heart of the issues, and those candid conversations are something I appreciate about them. And I think it was C.S. Lewis said the harshest skeptic is closer to Christ than sort of I don't know how he described it, but basically the apathetic man, the religiously apathetic man. And I think that's just true, and that your story kind of illustrates that well. So
I think just asking one for Christians, if somebody says they're an atheist, I just noticed this again. This may not be true, but this is generally, anytime I've talked to an atheist, here's what'll happen. They'll say, I'm an atheist. And you can tell, not by how they answer, it's kind of like a cool thing to, I'm an atheist. And they're used to getting like a millisecond of wowness. And so I always like to say this with an atheist. I always say, well, that's kind of cool, but I want to be respectful. But man, that's the most intolerant view, because you're like, and it kind of throws them off because they're not used to people not being impressed with their brains. And I'll just say, well, and I just kind of tell them what I think, but I do it in a respectful way of telling them they're wrong. And then I ask a lot of times, like, why are you? Because a lot of people that are claim atheists, they really just never been challenged. And I'll say, it's kind of intolerant. You really should take the agnostic view. And so I've converted a few to being agnostics, but it's like they just, I don't know. That's just when I've talked to them. Now some are hardcore, and a lot of them just they don't really know why they believe, they don't care. It's kind of like, I'm an atheist and leave me alone. But then another thing I'll tell them is like, well, you say because of science. Well, true science has to be observable. I mean, you say that all day, but it's not true. So anyway, I enjoy talking to atheists somewhat, but I kind of tell them what I think in a fun way. I don't. Yeah, I mean, when we say we shouldn't judge them, yeah, we judge them because God judges them. Says a fool says in heart there is no God. But we judge everybody because we evaluate truth. It doesn't mean we can demean them. It doesn't mean like they're less than. But yeah, I can have an evaluation of the truth. So I like to get people thinking. That's a whole nother discussion, because it's how people think are interesting. Ask people, hey, what's your spiritual background? And a lot of people, I think, don't really think through that. But
yeah, I also enjoy those kinds of conversations about the big meta-narrative questions. And I think, like you said, most atheists, when you press them, they're actually agnostic. the word atheist is just a stronger version of agnosticism, because and even most of them would admit you can't deny or you can't prove the non-existence of something. And so most of them are really agnostic. And so
I think it's
atheist is just sort of a trigger word for most of them.
That would be really true. And I think a lot of them just want to do, like, we had a YouTube channel one time, one of my daughters had it, and she got like over 1,500 views when we last checked, or 2,000. It was on like, why is somebody an atheist? And it was no moral accountability. And, if there is no God, you don't have to worry about it. Like I said, my friend I believe he was a consistent atheist. A lot of atheists that worry about morality are not being consistent with what they proclaim, because you don't need to worry about it if you're not. But again, people are moral because they have an innate, Romans says, an innate knowing what's right and wrong and conscience. So,
well, that's the importance of Romans chapter 1. Paul uses the phrase suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. And when I think about what that means, I think people will pick and choose a worldview that justifies their current life. They don't want to be challenged or to remove a sin or an immorality that they're enjoying. And so you justify it with a worldview that allows it. And Paul points that out, that this is the human condition, that we choose. He calls it suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. The pressing truth that there's a creator, just by looking at the world, how it's designed for life, the laws of nature that are consistent, the DNA molecule that we've discovered in the last 100 years. It's overwhelming evidence of a mind behind it all. The fine tuning of the universe is a big one. And so we choose to believe in whatever justifies our lifestyle. And I think that's what the Apostle Paul was getting at. And I think that's a good way to challenge people's thinking. It's like, are you believing this so you're not morally challenged? Are you, kind of having that conversation, I think, is a good one.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think another thing, like, as I think about our church, one of the roles we have is to help people have perspective and encouragement, even if they're not saved. So, like, a Ukrainian guy I know, he's just encouraging him to go for his dreams, helped him put together an English resume and stuff. And I think, so for example, everybody has a passion, everybody. And part of is to help us awaken it for God, but just, I think, acknowledging the worth and the passion the person has. Now, I think it's good. I think it's, for example, you've got this great podcast. Let me ask you, why did you do this podcast? Probably because you have a passion to get the stories out across Alaska. But I don't know, what made you do the podcast? I'm curious.
What made me do the podcast was I fly for some Bible camps in Alaska, and I noticed that the native youth that I fly are on social media an incredible amount. And I thought, even in these remote places, media content dominates people's lives. And I wanted to step into that arena where they are. And so that's how the podcast started, and it's just kind of evolved from there.
That's cool. That's really, really, so yeah, people listening, they should follow and like and share his podcast, because it helps get the word out, because it'll help impact the youth and the people out there and stuff. Another thing I'm passionate about, and I don't know how we walk this out, but suicide prevention, mental health. I'm always looking for opportunities to, do what I can with that, because suicide is such a big issue in Alaska and around the world, and we need to be proactive with it. So if you're listening and you feel like hurting yourself, don't. Your life matters. It really does. Find help. Talk to somebody. Call that number. because it's 988. You can text, you can call it, you can hit number 1 if you're a veteran, and it's confidential. Just talk with somebody, and I just think that's another area that I feel kind of passionate about, is how to stem the tide of mental health and suicide prevention. And I'd say another thing is, if you're out there and you like instantly go, well, that's demons or that's that. Oh, come on, man, be sensitive to where people are at. So that's just kind of my
I'd say
2-second commercial.
Every summer when I'm with Native youth, the topic of suicide comes up every summer. It's huge. It's a huge part of their lives. All of them have, loved ones who are now gone. And the other one I'm interested in is the I'm going to butcher the real name of it, but the fetal alcohol syndrome is very, very common in Alaska. And I don't hear much talk about it. I'd like to bring that into the podcast at some point. So
I think it's a good idea to talk with, like, the PA in our village. He's a believer, and a lot of the clinics I think all the clinics do have resources for that. But alcohol is a big deal. I was surprised. Here's one I didn't ask, but something I was surprised about is the amount of drinking. I always heard that, but the people in our village were like, yeah, we like to drink and beer and seeing the bar, and the alcoholism is really challenging. I do know people who were alcoholics that aren't alcoholics now, and they're walking it out, but it's very hard, I think, dealing with alcohol, because there's a cultural
and I think it's important. Yeah, and it's kind of a generational thing. Your parents are alcoholics, and then you become one yourself. You become whatever hurt, maybe your parents caused you. You then become that same monster, and it's like a generational thing. But I think there's so much grace to be had, because my parents personally are not alcoholics, are great loving parents, and I turned out well, because in large part because I had loving parents. Now, if I had alcoholic or abusive parents, I would very likely be an alcoholic, abusive person. And so there's so much grace to be had, and for people like this, not condemnation. Oh, you're an alcoholic, or you've done this and that bad thing. It's actually I would be that if not for the grace of God. And so you don't come in judgment, you come with compassion and kindness. My wife read the verse to me this morning, or reminded me, repentance, or how does it, it's God's kindness that brings us to repentance. And so it's, there's so much kindness involved with real repentance, and rather than just condemnation, you're a sinner. It's like, well, we're all sinners. What's the quote? Christians are just beggars telling other beggars where there's bread. We're all kind of needing this salvation. And there's not
that is really
come
true.
in judgment. So, it's coming in compassion.
I think another thing, I feel like I've kind of given you a lot to think about, but another key piece that I heard from a conference you and I went to a year ago is figuring out what success is for you and what do you need to do. And as you get older, you want to invest in what you really feel called to and stuff. So another thing is using our downtime, using it to develop my writing, and working on getting serious about content creation. That's something I really want to grow in, because God's given me gifts and creativity, and I want to use it. And so those are a few things I really feel passionate about that I want to keep growing in. And so the radio, I think just finding what you're passionate for the Lord and doing it in the backdrop of the gospel, of course, always about the gospel, the death, burial, and resurrection in Jesus Christ.
Well, it's absolutely the case. I could say for when I was learning how to fly a plane, I remember the first time I climbed into an airplane, I was a shaking, nervous wreck. Like, we're going to fly this metal thing up into the air. This just seems unnatural. And I was like, what am I doing? And same with the podcast. Like, I told myself, I have this idea. and I have no idea how to do a podcast. And I just started. I mean, just do the next little step, and I think the best things we'll ever do in life will feel very uncomfortable, and you're going to feel very clunky at first. But stepping out and doing it rather than staying in a safe zone where you're not stretching yourself, especially when it comes to gospel work, you have to step out, and you're going to be super clunky, or even sharing your faith. Maybe the first couple of times you're going to be awkward and weird, but it becomes a passion later on, is stepping out in faith like that. So, yeah, it sounds like, Matt,
You're so right.
It sounds like you have done that many times in your life, even coming to Akutan. It was like you get there and you're like, why am I here? What, it's those first steps that are the scariest. And you've done that quite a few times.
For me, it's more being faithful, because I'm more of a let's go, and sometimes Akutan is healthy because it's one thing to get here, it's another thing to stay here, and I think it's cool because you do have a role, and everybody has a role here to play, and but it is learning what success is, what validation is, and it's definitely a slower pace here, but that's good. And the other thing that's weird about Akutan, I don't know if you mentioned this, we don't have any trees. It's just a barren island. It's beautiful, but no trees and a lot of rain, and that's which we have otters. I'm looking at the otter right now swimming.
Well, as a tree lover myself, I would have a hard time with the no tree thing. I love trees; they're so beautiful. But
you count the trees, but I think it's good. God's good. He's doing great things. People listening, maybe you're a Christian. You should pray about God calling you to Alaska. Where is He calling you to? And we were in our 50s when we moved up here. Don't wait on the perfect timing. A lot of people wait and they never go through the door. Go through the door and let God shut it. And then some of you I'm talking to, and you're like, no, I need to pull back a little bit. But I think it's cool to be where you're supposed to be. But it's more cool just to be faithful. And I think that's what we need to be and what I need to be. And it's a great reminder. Remember, Exodus, I was reading this today again. I'm just struck by it. Exodus 15, great chapter. Praise of God. God has just delivered the Israel nation from the Pharaoh. It's the greatest. It's a great praise chapter. God's a man of war. It's so cool. And not even a few verses later, a few months, not even a couple months, they're complaining and murmuring. And I thought, wow, that's so true. But we need to be people not like the Israel nation that murmurs against Moses, ultimately about the Lord, but about Moses who cried unto the Lord. So I think
there's no better insight into the human heart and human condition than Scripture itself. If it was some kind of a fake religion, they, to deceive people and stuff, they did a terrible job, because the Scriptures just draw out the reality of the human condition, and it doesn't look great.
That's so true. Well, that's about all I've got. I think you've got.
Yeah. Fun. I think we'll wrap it up. Matt, thank you for this very candid conversation. I feel like I have an understanding, much more than my brief description of Akutan in the last episode. So this really is illuminating, we'll put it that way. And I appreciate your candid conversation and thoughts. We really went all over the place on this one. So I really enjoyed talking to you, Matt.
It was fun. But can I tell our listeners, could you pray for the podcast and the listeners listening? He didn't ask me to do this, but I think it's his passion, and he doesn't desire to make it all about him. But if you're having a podcast, a couple things you can do is pray for it, because it's for the Lord. And then something that doesn't cost you a cent, you can subscribe and share, because I guarantee you there are people, Christians all over the world, that would love to hear about the spiritual aspect of Alaska that are thinking of going on a cruise or doing things well. That's all fine and good, but ultimately, what is the kingdom, what God's kingdom doing on Alaska? And so I would heartily encourage all the listeners, if you haven't done it yet, to subscribe and to share. You've got social media, share it on Facebook, Instagram, all the ones, Twitter, whatever you do, share it and help this blow up, because it's a good thing and it's built out of a heart for the gospel. So that's my 2 cents. Pray for it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matt. And you also have some content online as well. And how do people see that?
Amazon.com, you could go to my name, and there's 2 books, Mathew, last name Vroman, V as in Victor, Roman, and there's 2 books. This is the Way, which is an English book. It's Kindle and print, that kind of walks through in less than 200 pages why God exists. It's for non-believers, but it'd be encouraging for believers. The other one is the one answer for life's questions. It's 27 pages, short book on the gospel. If you can find it, Buy the Bible's my new YouTube channel. And then apradio.org is where the weekly radio program is. It goes out to our borough. That's like counties in the lower 48, but borough. And so those are a few things that we're doing. It's called Hour of Hope on apradio.org. But anyway, so that's how you...
I will find as many of those as I can, Matt, and I'll put links in the description for you.
Well, thank you. That's really, really kind. And so it's exciting. And I guess, are you going to do a podcast on just what it's like? So I'm not a pilot. I get really sick in planes. I used to, and I kind of overcame that by the grace of God and figuring out some things to do. So I'm going to request as somebody that doesn't know anything about flying, I think you need to do a couple episodes on what's the reality of flying in Alaska. Just, okay, we turn on the plane and what's it like? So I'd love to hear a couple episodes on what's it like to fly in Alaska versus other places.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think we should do that. I do have some episodes on some of the flying stories. But you can look at previous episodes. There's a handful of those, especially during the summer. I do some winter flying also, but not as much. So the reality of flying. I think it'd be cool,
you could eat it.
Go ahead.
All that stuff. Yeah, wind speed.
Yeah, I have a handful of ideas, like flying through all the passes. Like there's all these mountain passes that that are on the sectionals on the maps, but there's also passes that pilots have found privately, and I know a couple of those. So I've thought about talking about just flying through a mountain pass and what that entails, things like that. So I have kind of an ongoing list. When people write me on the show, they tell me they like the flying episodes the best. So they are fun.
That's all. Anyway, I'll get off. Thanks so much, and keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great. Thank you.
All right, Matt. Thank you for the plug. I highly appreciate it. The like and subscribe plug. I'm not very good at doing that, so thank you for that. And thank you for the great conversation. This was excellent.
It was fun. Talk to you later. Have a good day. Bye.